So good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to be starting in a couple of minutes, but before we start, I would like to have a raising of hands. If anyone here is responsible for the social media in their society. Because when we, after the first talk, we will have a gap of 15 minutes, and so there will be some extended discussion, and I would like, if we have the chance, some of the other people who have responsibilities for social media to say something. And also we have put up on the board the handle addresses of the ISPP social media, just in case you don't have them already. So thank you all for coming, and this session is called Aptitude for Social Media in Plant Disease Research. And I thought about the topic because of the apps and also because of our relative inaptitude or aptitude for using social media. And I guess this is a new field, relatively unexplored, but something that's going to be more important in the future. I'm going to hand back over to my co-chair, Lodovica, in a few minutes, but we have an apologies for the third organiser, Jamison, who had to go back to work yesterday. So I'll hand over now to Lodovica.
May I introduce you? Good afternoon. Yes, I am replacing Andrea Masino, who is a colleague from the University of Torino, who is also working in the communication for the International Society. The first presentation is given by Dr. Greg Johnson. Dr. Greg Johnson doesn't need so much introduction because you know him very well. He is a plant pathologist in Australia. He has been working for years in the field of post-harvest diseases and international agriculture. He has been Secretary General, President, past President, and now is going to be soon the past President of the International Society of Plant Pathology. And he had the idea of, since he has a lot of interest in communication through social media, to have this session today. Please, Greg.
Thank you, Lodovica. So in proposing this session, we ask the question, is social media a time waster or a community of trust? Noting that despite varying views, social media can enhance research programs, record keeping and community engagement. And about half of the 800 respondents to our survey agreed. Here's some of our findings which may help us to improve the relevance of our social media.
Oh, Miss Betsy.
That's the standard slide change option. We'll report on the demographic profiles of users and non-users, the most important topics, the favourite platforms, the favourite societies and other sources of information, and discuss opportunities for improving progress in science, careers and well-being of plant pathologists, and consider also the needs of non-users. But first, how did we conduct the survey? We prepared a document which we published in the newsletter with a link to the survey after we had trialled some of the questions. And we then went on to continue to publicise it with the newsletter, but also using other means of dispersal, including other social media, other societies, individuals, newsletter alerts. And you can see that sometimes the response number would go up soon after we issued a particular request, including sometimes when we had eminent people do tweets. The first yellow arrow towards the beginning was when Sophia and Camoon sent out a tweet, and the last big peak was when we asked the Congress organisers to send a message out on their social media, and that got us from 700 to 800 responses. Looking at the demographics, we had responses from respondents in 73 countries and regions, and we did introduce a little bit of competition to some of the main societies by giving them updates on the numbers, because we're publishing some updates in our newsletter, and when we last checked, Germany was narrowly ahead of the United States in the number of responses, but also Australia, Italy, France, India, South Korea, etc. Gave us a good number of responses. Looking at the results, we found that probably the same trends were apparent at about 400 responses. And there were slightly fewer women than men responded. The 26 to 35 age group was the largest cohort, with just slightly under a quarter of the responses. The higher number of men was reflected more in the older age groups, particularly amongst the retired age group. And about 1% chose not to indicate gender identity. About half of the respondents were academics or researchers, and 2/3 were located at universities or government research agencies. These are the social media that we're using, and the International Society doesn't have a YouTube channel, but I put up the APS one as an example. We will also publish some of this information in our newsletter. And I posted some information also on our social media today. So about 43% of respondents said they never use social media. 38% use what we call the Big Five, which is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. 19% also use it once a month, and almost all respondents never use Pinterest, Snapchat, or TikTok. Comparing non-users with regular users of each of the Big Five, we actually see that only 20% of people never use YouTube. So I guess that means YouTube is more than cat videos, but it's also incidental use of social media. That is, people say they don't use it, but actually when they Google for how is a career in plant pathology or a particular methodological technique, they get taken to a YouTube channel which will have the information on it. So we are getting people who are accessing social media that way. About 2/3 sometimes use LinkedIn, a little over half use Facebook, about half use Twitter, although that may decline, and about 2/3 never use Instagram. Looking at whether whether the respondents access the socials on societies or through their colleagues, the relative interest in the various topics is similar, with conference, workshop news, latest research findings being the most popular topics. And when we asked what do they want to see more of, they said that they wanted to see more of conference and workshop news, latest plant pathology research findings, and training modules. Those were the things that people most wanted to see. What were the Big 10 amongst the respondents? The Big 10 were APS, International Society, the British Society, the Australasian Society, and so on down the list there. Other sources of plant pathology that are popular include friends and colleagues, professional organisations, the FAO, chemical companies, funding industry bodies, biosecurity agencies, and the CGIAR. Talking a little bit about comments, and we definitely live in a social media world. So just like pizza, social media is sometimes good, but sometimes improvement is needed. Some felt that it may be too widely used, but there's lots of potential for extension and outreach. Webinars are effectively replace conferences and save time and money. So streaming these things through social media can be a very cost-effective way of outreaching. But use is inconsistent, and people felt it was of low priority from the international society perspective. This, of course, reflects the fact that we are a small society relative to our resources. And also, personally, I don't want to get 10 tweets or messages a week from the various societies. I want to just get the ones that are important. And individual scientists do share interesting and relevant information. So we've learnt that yesterday's rubbish heap is today's refuge for biodiversity. And similarly, social media has unrealised potential. People felt it was important and useful for sharing research to better involve experts and those who don't know the sector. Twitter alerts of new pathogens to track new incursions were important, providing it complies with the local law, etc., in relation to releasing this sort of information. YouTube and TikTok are of growing use for training and explaining ideas, inventions and discoveries. And social media can be vital for engaging students, postgrads, farmers, politicians, policymakers and community. I was reflecting that I don't think we yet have any social influencers who specialise in plant pathology. YouTube, and I have the example here of a YouTube video that is available through the APS. It's a great little video about careers in plant pathology taking you further than you imagined. And I think that perhaps that reflects what many of us found in taking this as a career. So what are some of our conclusions? It is a valuable tool in plant pathology, but newsletters, website posting, paper journals still remain critical. The survey failed to capture use of some platforms or individual communities. That is, some communities weren't even able to access the survey or perhaps were afraid to. We didn't really capture anything about WhatsApp, ResearchGate, Google Scholar, WeChat, and also SMS messaging and mobile phone use can be very important, particularly in some more remote and developing communities, and SMS messaging can be a very important tool for extension and communication. So it's a two-way communication tool. It's not a time waster. People felt that Twitter was best to engage with others, read research, recent findings, interesting facts and related to plant diseases. I should note that I started writing this before our recent X. It can be essential for multidisciplinary research for engaging with farmers, community and industry. Critical for providing seasonal alerts to farmers in some places. I know, for example, experiences or talks I've heard from Korea where they use it to alert farmers. Can be useful for reaching politicians and policymakers. Conversely, it can be difficult for us when social media engages politicians in ways that make our jobs harder. great for exchanging opinions, and following groups can be critical. Some of the suggestions for how to improve include posting more often. My own view is that post relevance is important. And some people would like us to have integrated member societies and better in disseminating information. Non-users prefer to read newsletters and websites. They avoid using as it takes up too much time. Some say it's a monumental waste of time. Some prefer to restrict social media for not work. And some use the official websites. There's cautions relating to information being unbiased, there being insufficient filtering, a question of trust and trustworthiness, and some people say it can be overwhelming at times, and so they will have holidays from social media. Will we one day see the super plant doctor through YouTube or something similar to the Bondi Vet, which is an Australian television program about a real veterinarian? Just some idea of some of the information that you can get from your social media sites. This tweet by Jan Leach, our president, about the Congress got 37,000 views. And the tweet about the earthquake in Turkey got 3,000 views. Through LinkedIn, you can get a range of visitor demographics, and we now have grown by 1,000 followers in the last year, of whom 18% are researchers and about 15% are involved in education. This sort of statistics are only, I guess, the beginning of how we can learn to harvest more information and data about our social media to gauge what is being read and what isn't. And when we posted about this survey on LinkedIn, it was looked at by 1,800 people, but only 6% engaged with it. And today I posted on our socials just some statistics relating to our Facebook page just this week, where we have had a very large increase in people paying attention and responding to the post we made about the World Directory. So it's obvious that when we come together like this, there's a concentrated focus on our society socials. So when you're running a conference, this is an opportunity to use socials more to engage with your community. I'd like to acknowledge some of my colleagues who helped. Andrea, who isn't here, the societies, the 800 plus respondents. The survey is still open if there's anyone here who hasn't yet done it. And Lodovica, Serge Savary, Irene Kerno. It's a very good one for getting attention, and so that takes us to the end. We can pass over to questions.
Thank you, Greg. Do we have questions? Because I'm checking on. Let's first.
Hi,
stay in
thank
the
you
room.
for the survey and for sharing the results. I probably have a silly question, but I won't ask it anyway. What do we have a firm definition of what is social media? Because in your presentation you showed different types of tools that, to me, serve different purposes, and some of them I wouldn't have instinctively labeled as social media. So do we have a clear understanding of what the concept of social media really covers?
I think that the way to think about that is to think about what is social media serving, And in our discussion at the beginning, we said, is it a community of outreach? And I think that social media serves as a community of outreach, and in fact, perhaps the phrase social media isn't quite the right phrase for what are essentially apps for engaging with people in various ways and presenting information, communicating. They're communication tools, and had we just narrowly focused on what we think as social media, the sort that some people love and some people hate, then we would not have had as rich a profile, I don't think, of how people are interacting in sourcing information about plant pathology, because we also picked up the ways in which people who don't use social media are sourcing information, and we got a good body of comments as well.
Other questions? Maybe you had more, if you want. Okay.
Yep.
There.
Congratulations for the excellent talk and the good vision. Do you think that the same message can be vehiculated through the different social media, or each social media has each target and each message has a better media with which you want to drive through?
I'm sure that is the case, Gianfranco, but you know, and if you had a full-time social media person doing it for you, who'd studied at tertiary level about these things, that would be possible. But I think this is again part of the learning process for us as societies and individuals as to how the media is used. You know, I had a conversation with Sofiane Kamoun about his Twitter, which was, in my estimation, had the most followers amongst the plant pathology community, and he felt that the number of people who were liking the posts was more important than obviously the total number of followers. But you know, some of that information we have about which things were most popular is a little bit of a guide, but the way you present it is also important, for sure.
Okay, another. May I add something about this? Because could be the same topic, the same information, but for sure it must be provided in, if I think about Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook that we are currently using, in 3 different ways. Also with images, and it's completely different. And it's good to use the 3 systems with the same information.
So maybe this links to the session later this afternoon, or this evening technically, on teaching. Do you think that we can talk about who is a plant pathologist in a whole different section. But do you think it's necessary for whoever you consider a plant pathologist to be to have something on, you know, like science communication as an undergraduate module? Do you think it's something that scientists in general should be taught? And not necessarily social media communication, just science communication.
Well, yes, I think that some tertiary institutions make that compulsory, some science communication. And I think that we all have had the experience of wishing that we knew more about communication, about how to write grants, about how to write reports. I can remember going to an extension training workshop in the beginning of time, and you know, we had a lesson in photography. We had to do an after-dinner speech. We had to, you know, we were sort of spent a week learning various skills or finding out how bad we were. You know, and obviously it's, and I would say my feeling is also that the children who are growing up today seem to have a more balanced education where they learn more about some of those communication skills, even in primary school.
And also, where can we get a copy of your T-shirt?
You see, social media. Perhaps I should auction it.
Do we have other questions? Okay.
Thanks, Greg. Dave Cook from James Hutton Institute. I think I would just like to add a point really for perhaps opening for discussion, is that it's not so much communicating within communities, but it's communicating, the way I see social media is getting between communities, which is a rarer event. So my work on potato late blight, I mean, I have a contact with growers, advisors, people in the field who will send us information that we would never have captured otherwise. And that starts quite often reciprocal conversations about blight management with communities that never have access. So I think it's between communities is very strong as well.
Yes, and for example, you have the PestNet website run by Graham Jackson in Sydney, and he has outreach to the Pacific, which has been going for many years, where farmers could even send photos for diagnostic support. It depends on your job and what you're doing as to which direction you're facing, but as you say, it is important. Use the mic. This session is being recorded and it's going to be streamed online, so be careful what you say.
The survey has indicated 3 topics which should be underlined or responded more by ICPP or different societies. Have you thought about how ICPP is going to respond? Maybe it's a question to the next president to just show him the results of
which
topic.
3 topics do you mean?
It was 1, 2, 3. You were showing that more videos on how to do things.
Yes.
And 2 more.
Yes, that was
I don't remember now.
conference alerts.
Conference alerts and more of something. Yeah.
Latest research and
Latest research
and
exactly.
links.
Yeah, so this should be, because the survey is for something, yes? So if it was indicated, it should be also responded.
We do try to have an array of those things in our newsletter. And to some extent, we're dependent on social media that we get. But speaking from ISPP's perspective, I'm a little bit wary of doing reposts too often, because theoretically the people who are reading our posts are reading those other posts anyway, and we don't want to, be just turning them off our stuff by overloading them. Yes. We like to get exclusives as well, if ever you have a nice exclusive for the ISPP.
Who's currently running the ISPP Twitter, for example?
Sorry?
Is there a dedicated person?
So the social, this is how the social media works in ISPP, because we only have one part-time business manager. Andrea can post, I can post, and Daniel Uberly, our newsletter editor, can post. But then also we get things sent to us sometimes for posting as well. In the future, and I know perhaps already some societies have their own social media person, this will be something we would think about in the future. And we've talked about already about engaging some of younger people, but there has to be a filtering. I know, for example, the Australasian Society, you can offer posts, but there's administrators who decide whether or not to post.
So I have a question regarding the use of social media for outreach, and it's mainly that do you feel that when you are posting stuff, it becomes more like an echo chamber where the people that are liking and are engaging with it are people that already know about the subject, but it's harder to reach out to people that do not know about the subject, but would be maybe find it interesting if they had known that, they could, if they had known anything about the material at all, like anything about plant pathology.
Perhaps some of it is an echo chamber, but this is the advantage of having different types of social media and different ways of disseminating information. It's, perhaps the same from, the times past, where you have information packaged in different ways as well. but I just showed at the end some of the statistics that can be gathered, so you do get some idea of what is being looked at. You know, of course, if you get a lot of negative responses, you know that you've probably done something wrong or stirred the pot the wrong way. Any of the people who are responsible for social media any of them would like to add something of their experience?
My name is Tracy Steinrich and I'm running the ICPP2023 page. You may have seen us on there. So our current promotion with the koalas has been really successful. And I think it's from that perspective and really promoting the conference and perpetually going forward, those photos we can, sorry if you've shared them, we can bring them up again to remind people about it. And if people post their photos of the koalas, that's going to be a really good way to spark conversation and attract visitors. So we found it very useful.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm not a plant pathologist, but I say I'm working for EPO, European Plant Protection Organization. We use social media to, as we say, try to communicate with people who are not directly working on plant quarantine, and also to collect what scientists say. And maybe just for the koala, I brought with me This is a bug. It was a campaign we initiated for 2020. And we released 50 specimens in our countries, and then it went all around. And it was a very easy, because plenty of big organizations organize planned big events, and we say we don't have the means to do that. We send that, and it was very efficient. People take pictures, they share them on the social media, and it was a good way to engage different sort of people together. So, the koala was the same idea. If you want to take a picture with it and share on the social media, don't hesitate, it's here today.
I hope that we see Beastie the Bug attending ICPP. And our session.
Yeah. We can say maybe it's an ambrosia beetle, so it's a bit of a fungi.
I'm relying on my co-chair to tell us how our time is going.
Well, my point of view is from young generation, I think. And I was in a cultural association before, and we tried to communicate in microbiology, and I was in the plant protection, like explain the pathogen of the plant, because nobody care about plant pathogen. Like, in general, they think the plants are always healthy. And we try to explain them that it's not like this in an easy way, also with social media. Then this association was destroyed for several reasons, problems. And then we started other little page on Instagram. Like I started one with fungi. And then I didn't have time to follow, but in 1 month I had more than 50 followers, where I just had pictures of fungi that I found around, fungi and mushrooms, both, and shortly explain what they are. And they were all mega curious about it. Like, they wanted to understand better, they asked. And then on my personal profile on Instagram, sometimes I need some samples, so I just ask around, well, somebody see this fungus in this field, or somebody detect this, some insect. For example, part of my group work with Papilla japonica, and they searched sample in Italy. So I just share a picture of Papilla japonica and do you have in the garden? Just because we need samples. And they answer immediately. They're very engaging, the social media, especially for the young generation. Also for explain our point of view and so on. Also the drawing, I love to draw. And just to explain in an easy way my work, I think it's fundamental to use the social media. Like,
yes, because we also have things like iNaturalist where people can post pictures of things they see in nature. And in Australia there's a platypus survey going on where people are involved in posting sightings of platypuses to help document where they are still existing.
I have it now. Well, hi everyone. My name is Juliana Gonzalez. I have a personal science communication project in Instagram that started randomly, unexpectedly, but it has grown, and I've learned from it that two things. We can do in social media what we were talking about, connecting between us. For example, these days here, and I was at APS and MPMI too, and I've just been like approached by scientists, young scientists that I didn't know about, and they're like, oh, I see you on Instagram, hi. You know, and then we make a connection. So that's one thing. But then the other thing is we can really reach people outside of this community, what somebody else was asking about. I mean, I have people that see my videos about either plant pathology or just other scientific things that are like, I don't know, lawyers or economical people. People are something totally different. So I think there's at least two different openings there, and I don't think every single page should do both or should do just one. It depends, and in this case it's just being like naturally growing like that, but it's important to understand that it can do so many different things, and it depends on how each one sort of manages that and reach literally different people through that. So, but definitely super useful, at least in my experience.
So I've had multiple attempts at different social media platforms to try. So the one that's kind of worked has been for sclerotinia. So my research focus is sclerotinia, and we have a lot of producers that want to know, is this sclerotinia? Do I have apothecia? And we started in about 2019, I think. We have a Facebook page, and I realized that it's really important to have the relevant and consistent posting, because it really doesn't help to have something, and I don't always have the time. I teach 18 hours a week, and you do research, and it's, yeah. But what I decided to do, and this is some shameless plug, is we have like farmers' days, and we made these we have a logo, and we made these like caps, and we put like hashtag sclerotinia ZA. So it's like the bug and the koala bear. People wear it, and they immediately start asking questions, and we get a lot of questions on Facebook to help with diagnoses. So I think also on top of your point is to have like the purpose, have a clear intention for what you're going to do so that you can actually do it well. Yeah. So if you work on sclerotinia and you want this hat.
Not particularly in plant pathology, but I am part of a group that's called Gene Sprout, and I manage part of the Instagram of it. And one of the things that we do is that every 2 weeks we have a pop quiz where we teach people about random facts about plants, and it makes people that are not used to engaging with the platform to engage with it just because of the quiz that tells you, oh, you did well, you know something, or you learned something. But the one thing that we really noticed was that in order to engage more with people, you really have to have a face of someone that is like the face of your group. The more that you humanize the platform, the more that people want to engage with you. So that's one thing that we learned so far.
Thank you. I've just been alerted that we're 2 minutes behind schedule, and it's good that we've got some more discussion at the end as well. So I'd now like to introduce my co-chair, Professor Lodovica GULLINO from the University of Torino. Lodovica has a list even longer than me of achievements, and most eminently she will be the second awardee of the Francina Fisher Award in the closing ceremony. I'll hand over to Lodovica.
Thank you, Greg. By the way, while you were talking, I was posting. Good afternoon. My presentation prepared with Andrea, my colleague Andrea Masino, is dealing with another aspect of communication, like what means being both a researcher and a journalist. And I will focus on the International Year of Plant Health, which gave us indeed a good opportunity to promote our discipline. I try to describe which are the main difference between a researcher and journalist. Researcher generally like to stay, most researchers like to stay in their own lab or in their own greenhouse, and they tend, and they don't need to communicate very often. In general, researchers are not trained in communication. Very often they do not like to communicate, and even more often they are not good in communication. So probably in many cases it is very good that they stay in the lab silent and let somebody else communicate. What about journalists? Journalists are trained for communication, this is their job. Journalists have their own timing, so they need to be fast. When there is something new, they need to communicate. They cannot study for hours, days, and they want an answer, they want to know, and they cannot go into depth. Need fast answer, they can't wait. When they ask us something, we cannot tell them, you know, tomorrow, call me back tomorrow, next week, or I ask to my colleague because they need to write immediately. And we don't have so many scientific journalists. We are now having more courses for training scientific journalists, but we don't have so many. The researchers are accurate. Thanks God, they should be precise. They are slow by nature because it takes time to get results. They don't like so much to say what they are doing, and it's very difficult. I understood many times that for us as a researcher, it's difficult to give priority, in the sense that there is something that we like very much, where we are working on, and we think that this is the most important things in the world. While on the contrary, journalists have other priority. Journalists generally tend to approximate. They need speed. They tell always too much, so when you speak to journalists, you must be very careful telling something, because they will always say anyway more than you said. And they always need novelty. And novelty to them is different from what we find to be new, to be very interesting, because sometimes it's something completely different. So one possible solution is that I did on myself is why you don't become a journalist. Since I do like to communicate, I always like to communicate. So I decided many years ago, over 30 years ago, also to become a journalist. There are two types of journalists also in Italy, as in France, as I believe in other countries. The professional journalists, they only do journalism, and what we call publicists, which are journalists with the same, exactly as professional journalists, but they can also do other jobs. And for instance, in my case, I wanted to stay a researcher. So I decided to become a publicist, take training, taking courses, and of course to be that you must publish on newspaper and journals, getting paid for this, not just because you like to publish. This doesn't mean that a researcher becomes only journalist, but if you become a professional journalist and you stay a journalist, you understand much better what they need from you, and you learn a little bit better how to communicate. So you learn what to communicate, you learn better the priorities for a journalist, which are very different from your priorities as a scientist. You get into a much better situation to communicate with journalists, because you belong to their own community. They look at you as a colleague, and of course you must expect to be criticized by your colleagues, but this has never been my problem, because as we were discussing with my friend Frédéric, I am and I've been on the blacklist since so many years that indeed I don't care being criticized. To me, it's perfect. It's what I want to. International Year of Plant Health provided us a wonderful opportunity to communicate our discipline, to outreach, to that people understand the social, economic importance of our discipline. And so it was a wonderful occasion. And at the University of Torino, with my group and especially with Andrea Masino, we decided to invest a lot on this, and we got strong support from our municipality, from our region, as well from the Ministry of Agriculture, and of course from FAO. So we decided to build a program for the Torino University, but also for the city and for the whole region. The program was extremely nice, but the COVID arrived. And so we were ready to work in the field of research with scientific meeting, and we did some open days on culture with special activities, performance, art performance. We did a lot of art performance, not ourselves, of course, but with theater companies, already with many projects, concerts, and with the society, talks, open day, conference, workshop, schools, and so on. So we had a full program prepared. The COVID arrived, and in some way, we had to rearrange a little bit our program. But anyway, we could manage, because it was also this a good experience of trying to do exactly the same things in different ways. And in this case, being a journalist, having a wonderful network of with not only journalists, but with scientific, technical journal, newspapers, and many other fields, it helps to keep things going also without doing the things as we did in the past. So what we did? We wrote many more articles about our topic in different journals, going to the medical field, going to engineering, we did podcasts, and it was a wonderful experience using theater actors. We did popular books for children and for adults. And of course, as we also did something serious. I did coordinate a study for the FAO on and it was the scientific output of the International Year about the effect of climate change on pests worldwide. We had a wonderful logo, which is Le piante al centro. It's difficult to be translated literally, but it means plants at the center. And then, to tell the truth, as an inheritance, since the logo, I bought this logo, became the name of the new virtual center that I developed last year, which put together all my activities. That means keeping plants at the center. We did podcast. Podcast meant interviewing the people that we were expecting to have at our festival on plant health that we couldn't organize as a festival during COVID, of course, but they were interviewed by journalists, myself and other journalists, giving perspective, their own perspective on plant health. And when the situation was improving a little bit and we could have some moment of freedom, we were having a meeting open to the public with actors like Laura Curino, like Padre Enzo Bianchi was taking the aspect of plant health from the more religious, let me say, point of view. So we were trying to do things anyway, even if the situation was not as good. This is the production that we had, the scientific output, climate change and pests, journals, special magazine, a popular book. I have one copy there of Spores. If you want to have it, you can have it. And a book for children translated in 8 languages about plant health. So we did our best. And from Spores, which is a kind of plant pathology told from my own point of view, the spores I've been working with and what through these spores happened to me. We also had special podcast with actors talking about some diseases like Downy mildew of basil, like rust, I believe. I don't remember even all the diseases that we were talking about, but with music, presented to the public in a nice way. We also during, and this is a kind of inheritance of the International Year of Plant Health during COVID, we started an association with Ilaria Capua. Somebody of you probably know. She's a virologist, very much involved in research in the veterinarian field, and she had the One Health Center of Excellence at the University of Florida. In the case of We3, we are focusing on plant, environment, and women. So trying to give more value to plant environment, but also to the economic value of us women, because women were, I believe, the most the victims of COVID, much more than men. And as soon as the International Day of Plant Health started, we celebrated it in May 12 with an open day telling the story of the world through plants with Antonio Pascali, who is an Italian writer. In 2023, we did celebrate together with We3. And so I think that despite COVID, we were able, putting together our expertise, and I must say that all these kind of things have been possible, I would say 99% because of the presence of Andrea Masino, who is an extremely talented person and working very hard and also having nice, good ideas. At the end, I would say that the International Year and COVID played in synergy. We learned to do things in a different way, and people are now finally understanding why plant health should be considered in what I prefer to call circular health system: plants, animals, humans, environment. Plant pathologists are more proud of their discipline, and now we have so many tools to explain, for outreach, to explain to the public what we do, why we do certain kind of work. So indeed, I believe that we learned a lot during this period, and it was a wonderful experience. Another legacy for us from the International Year of Plant Health, all what we did, we decided that we couldn't just keep in a corner, but we wanted to continue. So we transformed what it was meant to be the festival on plant health that we couldn't run as in the International Festival on Agriculture, which is called Coltivato. To means Torino. We had the first edition in March 31st, April 2nd in Torino. It went extremely well, and we will continue in the future, always supported by our community, regional government, and Ministry of Agriculture. So being a journalist helps, I believe, yes. For sure, it's much more fun to see things also from another perspective. Thank you.
So are there any questions?
Thanks for that lovely run through. I'm just wondering, can you clarify, I was a little confused what you meant when you said you had actors for the podcast.
Yes.
But you also described the podcast as an interview, so why did you have actors?
No, we had two different kind of podcasts. Some were interviews, so we were interviewing colleagues, journalists themselves, people asking what they think about plant pathology, how they see diseases, and so on. In the case of the podcast coming out from spores, are special episodes, and so we had actors and singers because we were telling the story. And
storytelling.
So the voice was not our voice, but was an actor, which is much better.
Thank you for that.
And we'd sing, for instance, the story on basil, Downy mildew. We had the INRAE as a singer, the back, and the actor, of course, telling, because it's much more pleasant to hear to an actor than to to us, that we bring our dialects anyway.
Thanks for that. If I can I just ask a different question? I'm really intrigued by the children's book, and I wondered whether you could comment about how much adults learnt from that, as well as the children, or whatever you find interesting to talk about it.
Yes, the FAO children book is online on the FAO website, is in different languages. The other that I wrote are coming from my willingness to work a lot with schools. So I did some of them talking about biosecurity, but in the way that you talk with children, and they are very useful when you go and talk to school. So it's very pleasant. I did also cartoons book, and also storytelling books. And I'm also plant pathologist in between.
Thanks for your talk.
One more.
Yeah. It's very interesting because you've actually taken control of the situation. I was a number of years ago when we had an outbreak of a banana disease in Australia. I did a lot of media interviews and I got very, very frustrated with journalists. They never get it right, they're lazy, and they distort the story. So I decided that's enough. I don't give any more interviews, but I wrote an article for The Conversation. And that got read by 680,000 people worldwide. And then it was also translated in other languages. It got another 150,000 reads. So that's the wave I've gone. I just basically, when you need to do it yourself, like you've done, you've actually written most of this material. And I think we all need to do that. We need to popularize our science ourselves. I don't trust journalists anymore. I don't even read a newspaper anymore, because what you read is you're looking to someone else's eyes. We want to tell our story, and I think we need to do it ourselves. And congratulations on all the work you've done. Thanks.
Thank you. I introduce Frédéric.
You will.
Okay. The next presentation is by Frédéric SUFFERT from INRAE. Frédéric is an epidemiologist. He's a world expert also on topics that actually, I believe that also Frédéric is in a kind of blacklist, maybe. Not with high rank as I have, but yeah. And because he's also working on biosecurity, on agroterrorism, and he is one of the plant pathologists who is using most, and very well also I would say, social media. So please, Frédéric.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to give this talk. So I'm very happy to be here, physically present, to talk about. So you can see on the title. So transmission of phytopathology using social media. So the title is Phytopathology Scroll to Social Media Scroll, and I present this experience as a real opportunity with different interests to raise awareness of plant pathogens. So concretely, why I am here and what I did during the 2 or 3 maybe years, the previous years, is that I flooded Twitter with a lot of pictures of pathogens, mostly rust, but not only, and to show that the plant pathogens are common, very diverse, and also beautiful. And this is, I share these pictures not only for plant pathologists, but also for a really diversity of public. And how start this experience? So I think it's a good transition and consistent with what you exposed, Lodovica. Is the first reason, or the first element of context is the lockdown to control COVID-19, and at the same time the International Year of Plant Health. So, and this context, so is a big, displayed a big constraint. So professional constraint, you remember and you know as me that most of the experiment in the lab, in the field, etc. were stopped. most of us had to work at home, and in my case, with my wife, we have to manage a class for children, so we have 3 children. And to have a nice moment, we can walk in the near the home, but the walks were limited, 1 kilometer radius and 1 hour. So it's an example of the French situation, but you have the same, I'm sure. But this context gives us some opportunities. So I'm able to analyze these opportunities. I think I have need time to analyze the opportunities, but with this time, I realized that the opportunities were real. Opportunities to communicate on plant disease, because I had time for that, or I spent time for that. And also a more personal aspect is that I take time to question. I was constrained to do that for myself, to question about what has become my plant pathologist job since the beginning of my career. And the consequences of this context is that the experience I want to talk to present today is that really, and I insist on this aspect, a psychological life buoy during the COVID period. And it was also a motivation to take up a kind of challenge in family. And so I know I will talk about Twitter, and the objectives of the experience was to illustrate the diversity and the beauty of fungal plant pathogens, and through a naturalist approach that could be followed by any amateur, not only professional plant pathologist, and in any place colonized by plant, natural, rural, or urban areas. And the strategy, you see, is like an experiment. Strategy is to organize local phytopathological strolls, so from my home garden in the street and also in more distant area during holidays, to observe and identify plant pathogens with simple material. To do that, I shared pictures with a large audience on Twitter, and I received feedback and learned myself also from a lot of pathologists that are present on Twitter. The material I used, you can see on the picture. So it seems old material. So cameras, so simple small camera, but also a good camera, Canon, and a old microscope light binocular that I take from my office. And I use also Samsung mobile phone to take the pictures directly on the binocular microscope. So it's quite simple materials. So and it's the home lab bench during the 2 years. And when did the experience occur? So during mostly the 3 lockdown period we had in France, but also during the intermediary period. So you can see the small square correspond to the discovery or finding of one pathogen somewhere. And where? So at home, around my home. So it's a red circle. So I live near Paris, but also in the southwest of France, because I take holidays in the area of France, and with friends, with family, etc. So pictures of I call that my forest is 500 meters from my home. So I've chance. It's a beautiful place. And an example of the diversity that I found in this very simple and basic area is it's just an example of what I found is different species, rust species on bramble. So I was surprised that it's a relative interesting diversity. So I found 3 species on the bramble, and so I take the pictures and put on Twitter, etc. But also 500 kilometers from my home. So it's the southwest of France in Aveyron. So I make a small communication about this area because it's beautiful country. You can see the Viaduc de Millau in the pictures. And I use, so just to say that it's also kind of artistic approach. So I like the beauty of the plant pathogen, especially the rust, not only. And you have maybe on this picture, my favorite pictures of rust is the axial stage of so 3 species. And this include also graphic aspect of the rust under the microscope. You see here small examples of spore at different stage. So a result, a scientific result, is that on Twitter, I realized that rust are preferred by TWIPs. So by me, but maybe a biases. But I try to understand why this preference. So you have on the graph the number of engagement, so like, repost, etc. And that rest are higher level of engagement. And I found 2 different reasons that I propose to you today. The first is that, as you know probably, Rust is an emblematic group of fungal pathogens with a complex cycle. Most of them are heterocyous macrocyclic, and it means that there is an alternate host and a primary host, and you have to the five stage of the rust, and this kind induce kind of detective challenge for somebody who is interested by rust. I mean, it's to find the 2 hosts. So sometimes it's difficult, sometimes the secondary host is not known or didn't exist, and to find the 5 rust stage. And just an example of the result of this detective challenge. So it's the garden of my mother-in-law. I found also you have 2 different plant hosts, 2 different species, and I found in April on Juniperus, so the telial stage of Gymnosporangium species, and in July on Quatergius, so the axial stage. So it was my detective challenge. And the second reason why rust species are so loved by people on Twitter, I think, is the addictive nature of what I call collection-based approach. I mean that, to my knowledge, there is more than 3,000 species of rust known in the world. And what analogy, I did the analogy with the Pokemon paradox developed by an author who is a scientist in sociology. His name is Acorn. And the Pokemon paradox is that, so it's a study that shows that in UK, children are able to name more Pokemon than animals that live around their area. So that's bad. But the good things is that it shows that Pokemon Go can be used to interest the children to be open to biodiversity, etc. And the creator of Pokemon Go is a Japanese man. Basically it's an entomologist. And the Pokemon, you have, don't know if you know, but you have different evolution, and the different evolution can be an analogy with the different stage of the rust. So most serious things during these experiences is that I report and I found a really uncommon pathogen on endemic hosts. So I mean the pathosystem is a rare pathosystem. For instance, this summary in the Pyrenees, so in the mountain of south of France, I found a Melamsora and a rare endemic species, and that's really a satisfaction with you when you find this kind of pathosystems. Or I suppose you can have a similar satisfaction as a professional life. To conclude, so I learned during this experience. I learned a lot, really, by doing my homework to identify the pathogen I found. And to do that, to learn, finally, it's not because I am a plant pathologist, but I was able to use reliable and open source of information. So the first source of information is a mobile application to identify the host species. So and this application is PlantNet. I use also a book from Klenke and Scholler. It's like Flora is very rich book, so to help to identify, and also a database on internet that's very very easy to use and very interesting and complete. And last very important point is that I learned, and that's the interest of the social media and Twitter especially, that I learned from many other colleagues, so professional plant pathologists, but also amateur, by sharing my findings on Twitter and by received correction, because my first identification are wrong. And that's very interesting to receive so comments that that's wrong, it's a bad identification, and to understand why and what to search to be sure of the identification. So just a slide to mention the future of plant pathology and social media. So I use Twitter. Now Twitter is became X. So you know that there is some discussion about scientists as I begin to lift the media. So my question is, have we to continue to use Twitter? I think yes, but you have on the slide the different also opportunity. E-Naturalist is a real scientist application to put the different discovery. A lot of users. And my take-home message. So Twitter and this experience were a real opportunity to promote phytopathology through a combination of classical approach. So I mentioned detective game, the addictive nature of collection approach that we can apply also in plant pathology, and by developing both scientist and artistical approach. My own interest, I insist at the beginning, is that it was a psychological love boy during the COVID-19 and a self-education to learn a lot in plant pathology. Plant disease can be beautiful and merit attention beyond the professional issue and the problems that we have to solve. And an important point is that our community need to attract naturalist amateur like for plant or birds. And this could be helpful to assess plant pathogen diversity. And for that, social media, I think, is really a good way to enlarge our audience. So I know I'd associate to this experience, so my wife, Muriel, which is present in the attendees, and also my children, we follow us during this experience. And most interesting thing is that this experience is described in an article which is available in open access in plant pathology. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Frédéric.
So the question to Frédéric is very different. You mentioned the collector syndrome, and I know what you mean because I'm a collector myself. So, and it tends to pile everywhere in the house. I was wondering whether you were keeping the samples you were taking photographs on and sometimes micrographs on for reference. For future reference and sort of herbaria, and is that an objective of the project, or is just maybe a byproduct?
So I don't know what I want for the future of this experience, but in case of, I keep in a small herbarium at home. A small envelope, dry specimen of the collection. Yes, I don't know why exactly, but so the departure of this collection point in the herbarium is that so our lab moved from so we are in west of Paris. We move our lab, our historical lab, from Grignon. I don't know if you know the location. We move in Paris-Saclay in a new building, and during the movement, we found old herbarium, and nothing was planned for this herbarium. And at the last moment, so we left a lot of things in the old lab, and at the last moment, nothing was planned for this herbarium. I take the box in my car, take with me, I keep at home, and when all was organized in the new building, I put again in somewhere in the new building. And my thing was it's terrible. If I were not here to do that, all the herbarium will have been lost. So it's not a whole herbarium, but in the last in the middle of the last century. So it's 70 years old. And there are a lot of rust from the Paris area. So I don't know what to do with my little modest herbarium, but not. It's the same with the old big herbarium. So
just perhaps before we conclude in complete this session, we could go back to the beginning, the early talks, and ask whether anyone would like to have more general comments about social media and plant pathology, and also just to indicate that we'll keep reporting. The key channel for reporting about our survey will be through the newsletter, first of all, does anyone have any more comments to make about the topics we've discussed today? And what is the feeling for people, whether this session was valuable? Would you like to see more social media sessions in future congresses?
I appreciate that it was a social media topic, but I think it was more personalized. It was about your experience and your personal experience as plant pathologists and as people, and I think it should be plant pathology and people. It's so inspiring, and I think this is really cool. Like your own experience and your advice now, like you're used to dominating, you know? Just remember, you're not in control. I think having that will make ethics and integrity in research so much stronger, because we are people.
We received one submitted abstract for this session, and I felt that reflected the fact that there was an instruction that you could only really submit one, and people didn't want to waste their one chance of getting a topic on social media presentation, and we've got to rethink that as well, but to encourage people to tell their stories.
If I could make a suggestion, wouldn't it be fitting that ISPP produces a sort of a vademecum guide, whatever you call it, on how to best use the social media for plant pathology purposes? Because I think in the survey about half of the respondents said they wouldn't use it at all, and maybe it's just because they don't know how to use them and what they can do with it. So maybe that it would be a fitting place to have on the ISPP website or wherever a short guide on ethical, practical, usable means of using the social media for plant pathology. Just, I don't know whether it has any value, but anyway.
Yeah, I thought the title was confusing because social media is just a tool, so maybe it should be plant pathology in the community or something like that. It reflects better what we actually want to do, because there's many ways you can do that. And social media is just one tool. You can write in other things, in newspapers, the conversation. You can do other media things. So I think it's really, you gotta focus on the aim and not on the tool, maybe.
Not this time.
Yeah, I think that the session was very, very interesting. And just as hypothesis, different approaches and message can be used for the different potential users. Just as an example, I opened a Facebook account to try to engage the students for our university. Later, I saw just 2% of the users were lower than 18, so it was completely useless, the Facebook. So, so if you want to engage the young people and to attract the plant pathology, Instagram may be the best, I guess. While Twitter may be to target a specific message for the scientist, and maybe Facebook for the general public. Taking in mind who are the main users and the main categories.
Just a suggestion for Instagram. I know that we are a lot plant pathologists, so why not engage all and at least one post per person with a font that is the same for everybody, explain what they are doing, or only the pathogen that they work with. I mean, I think it's easier. You have a content you can share daily in the time, like one post per day, and we are 2,400 now here, so 2,400 posts ready in the time. Okay, it's a lot of work to coordinate and control, but at least you have somebody that produce something and it know what is writing.
Maybe we just need a hashtag.
Also, no, it's just for use the page, for have all the content inside in one point, or the hashtag and then reposted in the page with the same font. The important thing that you have a same font that they can recognize immediately and reconnect with you. Just that.
So if people have some of the comments that are coming through, if people want to message through the socials, that will help us to deal with some of the things that you're raising, to think about how to do them. And
yeah, I think just, it's a personal opinion that social media, Instagram, Twitter, etc., the strengthness is that it's a freedom space, and freedom space for me is that if you are plant pathologist, you don't like social media, you are not obliged in your career to use the social media. If you like it, if you are good in to communicate in a specific way, you can do, and you will find successful and really positive things. Our goal as plant pathologists and scientists is to publish and to communicate in a scientific way, and we are obliged to do that. So some people don't like publish, so it's difficult in English, etc. But we are more or less obliged to publish. So social media, you are not obliged to do that. And I think it should keep a freedom space, and if you don't like social media, you don't use it. It's not a problem for me.
So, thank you, everybody. I know that some of us still have further meetings to go to, and I was glad that we had an audience, and
yes, active audience.
And certainly glad that we had 800 people respond to our survey, and I think we had an interesting range of perspectives on, what do we call it, Andre? Community engagement. Yeah. And I don't know your name, but you are the person who is doing the podcast based on ISPP?
I am, yes.
So what's your name?
Jim Bradeen. It's the American Phytopathological. Thank you. Jim Bradeen, Colorado State University. The American Phytopathological Society has the Plantopia podcast, which you can access on all major download platforms. So it really is an interview-based podcast that aims to showcase the diversity of what plant pathology is and the diversity of folks around the world doing plant pathology. So here outside I've been doing Plantopia recordings, 3 different folks so far. So thank you for the plug.
So Jim was supported by ISP, APS, and the University of Colorado, I think, to come here to do some podcasts based on our, based on the wide spectrum of people who choose this as a career, and it'll be something else we'll publicise once it's up and going, and there's a whole range of interesting podcasts already on the APS website. You can listen to the interview with Jan Leach, for example. So with that, I'll close. Thank you all, and thank you to Andrea, who's here in spirit, and also
Yes.
Lodovica.
We were in contact.